We now transition into a conversation that builds on this very theme and tries to reimagine our economic future through the lens of inclusion, care, and dignity. In a world grappling with inequality, informalization, and ecological limits, this session will explore bold, people-centered alternatives to conventional development models. As session chair, we're honored to have Dr. Rina Agarwala, Professor of Sociology at Johns Hopkins University, to chair the session. Joining her are three absolutely extraordinary leaders who've championed inclusive economic development from the ground up and the top down. We have Reema Nanavaty, Director of the Self-Employed Women's Association of India, better known as SEWA. Please, she's a real legend in the field, so please. We have Cathy Feingold, International Director at AFL-CIO and Deputy President of the International Trade Union Confederation. And we have Dr. Vijayendra, Lead Economist at the World Bank's Development Research Group. Thank you. We look forward to a great session.
So thank you so much and welcome to our final opening plenary. It's really my honor and pleasure to introduce it today. We're going to continue on the theme of alternatives and move our gaze from geopolitics to inclusive development on the ground. So as we all know, us academics have spent years, decades, since the 1950s, working with development institutions and government bodies on reducing poverty and improving or growing our economies. And despite the strides we have made in healthcare and technology and income, we've also had many, many failures. We still see basic malnutrition and thirst. We still see an expansion or a gap between the rich and the poor, and we're still depleting our environment. So it's not surprising that our development efforts are being so heavily critiqued by both the left and the right today. And clearly we need a development model that is an alternative to the one we have been using all these years. And on this panel today, we're going to speak about one such alternative called the economy of nurturance. Broadly speaking, the economy of nurturance turns our attention away from focusing only on income poverty or GDP growth to also looking at connections and co-relationships within families, across society, and with our environment. And the economy of nurturance highlights sort of four specific areas of nurturance. First is nurturing our daily life, that is healthcare, shelter, food. Second is nurturing our earth. Third is nurturing the human mind through knowledge. And fourth is nurturing investments and finances to nurture the next generation. And perhaps most importantly, the economy of nurturance is not some idealistic fantasy or some esoteric academic theory. It's actually something that has been in operation, growing and evolving in India since 1972, when Ela Bhatt first articulated the concept and founded a collective action organization called the Self-Employed Women's Association, or SEWA. And SEWA, which we will hear much more about in just a moment, is a remarkable and empowered union of 3 million women workers who have been practicing the economy of nurturance for over 50 years. SEWA is also an organization that is very dear to my heart because I worked there just after college 30 years ago, and it's something that really did change my life. SEWA really taught me everything I know. Reema Ben was my first boss. And SEWA has a lot to teach all of us who care about development and our collective futures. So with that, I want to turn it over to our speakers. Each of our speakers are going to speak for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to a question and discussion format. So our first speaker is Reema Nanavaty. Thank you.
Namaste. Good evening. I've lost track of time. But I speak here on behalf of our 3.2 million members, all women workers in the informal economy in our country, where 93% of the workforce is in the informal sector. And therefore, at SEWA, we believe that we are the mainstream. It's the 7% formal sector which needs to partner with the 93% of the informal sector. But I think, as Rina Ben today also mentioned, that why there is the need for this alternative model or economic model of development. And I think this entire concept has emerged or is questioned by the poor women workers, the members of SEWA, who are economically very active and yet remain excluded by the direction in which today's civilization is moving towards greater violence, greater inequities, towards economy based on erosion of natural resources. We also know that today worldwide progress is measured as growth in GDP, growth, or how modern science and technology has evolved and how the production systems have evolved and how the lifestyle is progressing in the countries. World encourages us to be exploitative in growth, but progress is the mode of conduct that leads man to the path of his duty. As Gandhiji said, the economic, social, political systems should move for better relationships and build collective strength at the community level. This has resulted into threefold crisis which our members have been experiencing as I speak now today. Rising poverty despite abundance, rise of intolerance, hatred and violence, and environmental catastrophe. I would really request all of you that please join towards the end of the panel in praying for the villagers in our country who are at the border, who are really facing the wrath of all the attack that's going on between the two neighboring countries. But I would just come back to again why the new economic or the alternative economic model is needed. And I think the result is also that finance has become an instrument of growth. We had been hearing in the earlier panels on the industrial development, on the bilateral trade agreements, on defense, on AI. And I was feeling, oh my God, where are we going? Where are the people in all this that we are discussing? Today, finance has become an independent structure, detached from the real world. Money is a tool to make more money and more money. All tools must serve the humanity and not the other way, which we are experiencing right now. I may sound very different to the economists and to the industrialists and to the business people sitting here. But therefore, I think the need for building an economy of nurturance, which is a transformative idea rooted in 5 decades of experience of the leadership of women workers in the informal economy. 3.2 million SEWA members. It challenges the mainstream economic paradigm. Just let me know if I'm overshooting my time. And an alternative path which is centered around care, sustainability, and equity. As Rina Ben also mentioned, that according to Ela Bhatt, building an economy of nurturance is about how women at individual, family, and community level play an important role in creating a collective capital with potential of sustaining meaningful growth. Therefore, I think the model prioritizes caring and sharing over acquiring and accumulating, optimizing over maximizing, sustainability, both all social, ecological, and financial, over short term profit, service and cooperation over competition. It recognizes that we already possess the resources, the technology, and institutions to end poverty and reduce inequality. Emphasizes using these to benefit all species and not just humans alone. The model works on women's leadership in finance, particularly grassroots finance, like cooperative banks, the self help groups in countries like India and in other countries, as they embody nurturing traits in financial behavior: trust, responsibility, mutual support. The model also links integrated financial services, so it's savings, credit, insurance, pension, and financial literacy. To meet both livelihood and life needs, health, education, and emergencies that may come up. It also promotes decentralized democratic systems. Women are not just only beneficiaries, but owners, managers, and users of the financial institutions. And this leads to creating collective capital and community oriented economic base. I think our 5 decades of experience has brought about several such examples which have gone to scale. SEWA Bank, which is our first ever cooperative, it's a cooperative bank governed by the Federal Bank of India. Likewise, we have an agribusiness initiative which connects around 254,000 small and marginal farmers, and where no farmer should go hungry. Why does a farmer remain hungry? And very often, what the farmers grow, they do not eat, and what they eat, they do not grow. But Rudy tries to break this by building local decentralized supply chains. We have women owned energy initiatives, we have women owned data centers as well. So I think this is what building an economy of nurturance, which is an alternative economic model. And I think when the world is going through a turmoil where we see a lot of enmity and hatred, it's time that we all come together to discuss this alternative economic model. Thank you.
Thanks so much. What an honor to be here on this panel. Thank you, Reema Ben, for anchoring us in this economy of nurturance. So I represent the 50 million unionized workers here in the United States, as well as the 200 million union workers around the world. Proud to have SEWA as one of our affiliates who's always pushing us to include these issues in our conversation and our analysis. So I cannot think of a better moment here in this country to be talking about the economy of nurturance. We are at a time of rupture. Since World War II, we have the rupture due to technology, due to climate, demographics. There's a whole list of reasons why we're in this moment of rupture. And for a lot of us, there's been a lot of turmoil in this country, as you were mentioning, Reema Ben, but out of turmoil, I think, comes opportunity to think about transformation. And so I want to really focus on what is the work that we need to do right now to think about transforming our economic model, which obviously has not been working for workers. And so I've been thinking about how do I translate this really important economy of nurturance into the work that the labor movement is doing. And so a little bit about how I've been thinking about it. First of all, the labor movement always thinks about economic models as answering the questions, does it improve the lives of working people? Yes or no? And that is often not a question that is asked by economists. And is it good for the environment? Yes or no? And again, these seem like really basic questions, but when you center those questions, you start looking for different answers. And you center it in exactly the workers that we heard Reema Ben talk about, or the workers here in the United States. And we know that, that when we talk about economic models, it's not random, right? It is about concrete policy decisions to get us to this different economic model. We often just take economics for granted, that it just is, and we don't have any power to shape it, but we can be very intentional about shaping it.
So let us see this as a time to be transformative, not thinking about rebuilding, because I think here in DC we've had a lot of debates about how do we rebuild, very binary. If not this model, we go back to this old model, but we have an opportunity to be transformative. And so I want to center unions, because I'm assuming many people probably don't know the role of unions in this conversation. And we really see unions as being on the front lines of democracy. It's actually often the first place people experience democracy. They go to work, either things are good in their workplace or not. They decide they'd like to change their situation in the workplace, and they think, well, one person alone can't really just change and say, hey, I work better, I deserve a better salary or better working conditions. It's about the first time they think collective action is what I need to work with my colleagues in the workplace, vote for a leader, and that's democracy. It's the first time many people in our country vote. So unions are really the entree for many people to experience real grassroots democracy, and I think that's very important. Given this experience with democracy, they're usually on the front lines of shaping the economics of their workplace. What kind of wages, what kind of social protection, how will technology be integrated? We have some great examples of negotiations between unions and employers about how technology gets implemented. So unions are often the first place people experience shaping economic and social policies in real time that really impact their lives. So unions play a critical role in really thinking about what is the economic model we need today that's fit for purpose, that can address the incredible challenges we're facing, huge inequalities, and technology that is changing very quickly, displacing, replacing workers. What is it that we need? The other really important issue that unions represent is they're self-sustaining. So they can express their opinions as they would like. They can talk about alternative economics without fear of retribution. And I think that's a really important point compared to other organizations. They're self-sustaining, and so they can talk about what is a transformative economic model that works for working people. I want to talk a little bit about what it might look like to have that economy of nurturance that you're talking about for working people. The first thing is we would definitely agree with you, Reema, about the need for increasing investment in the care economy, in the green economy, and in infrastructure. And that is not a priority that we're hearing debated around the world anymore. We're actually hearing about a growing agenda of deregulation. We just hosted the International Monetary Fund and World Bank meetings. The main agenda item was growth and deregulation. And a return, some people were talking about austerity, which usually means cutting these kinds of important investments in the care economy and the green transition. The global labor movement has done research that shows just investing an extra 1% of GDP in the care economy over 5 years would yield an average GDP increase of more than 11%, as well as a 6.3% increase in total employment levels. We know what different investments would look like. So let me look at how I might translate this economy of nurturance into real-time agenda for the labor movement. So pillar one, you talk about a nurturing daily life. Working people, everyone, all communities need health care, need food, need shelter. So what would we ask for in our agenda? Full employment and living wages for all workers. That needs to be a policy target of economies and countries. We need to expand policy interventions aiming to employment guarantee programs. And we need to foster the care economy. We need labor rights, trade union freedoms. I was just talking about if you can't organize and speak out about what's happening in your workplace that affects you directly, your economic situation, then we can't really change that economic situation. So you need to have your fundamental rights. And we need universal social protection. We need health care. And I know we have some innovative parametric insurance type of expansive thinking about what kind of social protection do we need that's fit for purpose. Pillar two. You talk about nurturing the earth, Reema. Well, the labor movement would talk about climate justice and just transition policies. We need to reform energy and transport sectors through state-led green investments. We need to tax polluters and the ultra-rich. So we really need to focus on this clean energy transition that is just, that puts workers, governments, and employers at the table to negotiate these issues. The third pillar, nurturing human minds through tech and knowledge. We need technological governance and AI for people, not for profit. AI and technology can support working people. We have seen it integrated in a way that helps working people and the environment, but it's about policy choices, and we need to make those policy choices. And in nurturing the human mind, I think a lot about the right to a public education that gives you both the analytical and vocational skills you need to live a life of dignity. And lastly, the one I think about a lot, which was pillar 4, nurturing investments and finances to nurture the next generation. We're stuck in a model of short-termism. We think about today. We only think about what will I gain? What can I earn? But we need to think about future generations. So what is the labor movement thinking about in terms of our economic policies that get to this last pillar? Tax justice and fair share economics. We need to close tax loopholes, impose a global minimum corporate tax. We need progressive, not regressive taxation. We need to re-regulate finance for the real economy. We need debt relief. Countries are saying they're not able to invest in the social protection, in healthcare and education, and in the clean energy transition because they're stuck financing their debt. So we need immediate debt relief and economic sovereignty. We need trade rules and equitable development. There's a lot we could unpack there about trades. And we need democratic multilateralism and global solidarity. We need to rethink what is the multilateralism that we need that's fit for purpose, that brings us together, that will allow us to move this kind of transformative economic model. So I see a lot of ways that the labor movement can build this transformative model, and we look forward to working with all of you to get there. Thank you.
Let me first say where I come from. I'm a PhD in economics. I work at the World Bank's research department. I've done so for 26 years. So what I want to sort of talk about is to draw on the economy of nurturance, on the SEWA model, and ask how we can make that work in the real world. Yeah. What does it teach us about how we do policy? And the first thing I want to say is that people like me, people like us, people who work in large universities, work in large multilateral donor agencies, we should recognize ourselves as part of the problem in the following sense. When we do policy and we do research for policy, think about it very carefully, but ultimately many of us, whatever may be motivating us inside and why we might have entered this profession in the first place rather than becoming investment bankers or something, we're entering a model of career, we're entering a career track. Yeah? If you're a tenure track assistant professor in some university in a social science department, you have to publish in the top journals. You have to be smarter than everybody else. If you're in the policy world, you have to be smarter than everybody else. Of course, in the world of social media, be more visible than everybody else. You have to appear smart, talk smart. In fact, you have to show that you're smart. That is the nature of the game. That then gets translated into policy where whatever your political persuasion, your smartness is what then determines what the current administration is going to implement. Do you see what I'm saying? You're manipulating the levers of government because your smartness is telling you how to change the world. Everybody wants to be a change maker. When you want to be a change maker of that kind, you reach that point via 3 paradigms of policymaking. The neoliberal paradigm, which means governments stay out. The neo-Keynesian paradigm, which says manipulate taxation, manipulate monetary policy, manipulate expenditures in ways that make people better off. And we'll tell you, because we are so smart in the Harvard Economics Department or the Hopkins School of Public Policy at SAIS or the World Bank's Research Department, what you need to do to make the world better off, and government will follow that. Or the last 15 years, it's what I will call the new paternalistic model. Nudge them because we know better than them what is good for them. So we will run behavioral experiments and shove them in certain ways so they will be better off even though they don't know that they're better off. Yeah? Or we run, we run randomized control trials borrowing from public health on things that should not be randomized. Okay? What is the end result of all of that? The people we are supposed to be helping, our so-called beneficiaries, have no voice in all of this. They are having things done to them rather than having control over their own lives. So the economy of nurturance to me is about what in this world of policymaking, in the real world, I don't care what your political persuasion is. In fact, I would argue that the rise of authoritarianism in the world, the reduction in support for democracy around the world is because of this form of policymaking. People have things done to them rather than people participating in things that affect their own lives. How do we then create a system where ordinary human beings, whoever they may be, including you and me, have a say, a greater say in things that affect our lives? And that comes to a very conservative principle, the principle of subsidiarity. Power over policy should be allocated in such a way so that you give as much power as possible to the level at which it makes the most sense to do so. In other words, education should be decentralized. Management of health clinics should be decentralized to the local level. People should be participating actively in things that they actually know something about. I don't mean that a local member of a village should be running a vaccination campaign. No, you public health folks are very good at that. That should be left to you, to the central government, to the federal government. But certainly, in asking, has somebody been vaccinated or not, that kind of local knowledge has to be decentralized. Why is that such an obvious principle, not universal, not accepted as something that you should do? And in fact, organizations like SEWA are seen as boutique, as seen as cute. Oh, they do that kind of work. They're Gandhians, that's okay. Now, interestingly, SEWA is actually an exception. The SEWA model was nurtured within Indian notions, within Desi notions of what it is to be a community, what it is to deal with collective action, and has had a huge impact. Beyond SEWA, you could argue that the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, which now affects 100 million women all over India, is inspired deeply by SEWA. So SEWA's impact has been way beyond its 3.2 million. It's across the country through the NRLM, right? The 73rd Amendment to the Indian Constitution is an extraordinary document that gives constitutional power to the simple idea that every Indian villager should have a village council that they can see eye to eye and work with. They should have access to deliberative spaces, village meetings on a regular basis so they can directly confront their elected officials and have a say over basic things like who gets a scholarship in my village, who gets access to a poverty benefit in my village, because otherwise, let me digress a bit on poverty. Poverty is generally determined, my colleagues do this all the time in the World Bank, through what's called a proxy means test. If you make less than X amount of money a day, you're poor, and we will give you benefits. And that has been $1 a day, it's been going up and down. Makes no sense, because you go to villages, and we've documented this, people say that lots of people who seem to be above the $1 a day line are in fact desperately poor. And a lot of people who seem desperately poor on that $1 a day thing don't deserve this money at all. Discuss with the local community who deserves, who's deserving of that particular benefit, and question whether that metric makes sense. Bring power of local knowledge to bear in making policy better. Have people participate in what they do. It's a simple idea of what Eleanor Ostrom called co-production, which we all know about. Yet, why is this not a dominant paradigm? Why is the only dominant paradigm, the RCTization, the nudging? By the way, I run RCTs myself, so I'm not going to say that I don't have anything against the technique. It's like being against linear regression. No. But how it is applied, the culture around it, the dominance, the idea that now because of this RCT world, only policies that donor agencies should be doing are simple and should be scalable. Yeah? Why can't SEWA be scalable? We've shown it with the NRLM. It's gone from 3.2 million to 100 million, 10 crores. It's documented. I mean, we have the data. We set up the MI system. They have all the data. It requires co-production with a spirit of learning by doing, a spirit of self-criticality, a spirit of humility, not knowing that you know the answers, but co-producing the answers with the folks you're trying to help. So they are part of that process. Not to think that because I went to Hopkins or Harvard or University of Pennsylvania, where I went, we're somehow smarter than everybody else. Yeah? That, to me, is a more reflexive form of policy making. Reflexive is a sociological word which I love. The idea that we are not better than you, we may be more powerful than you, but we're going to use our power to create an economy of nurturance, to create an economy where everybody participates in making them better off, while not telling you to take care of defense and foreign policy and trade, though we'll look at the implications of trade on you and bring those ideas in. It's a division of labor, it's a division of power, it's an allocation of power according to where it fits the best. That's how you scale up the economy of nurturance. And in fact, it's been shown to have been done by successive Indian governments. Yet, it is somehow seen as not one of the standard paradigms, but something separate, something boutique, something cute. The lefties do it. I ain't no lefty. I want it to be done. Yeah? So for God's sakes, let's rethink how we do policy. If you are, I'm sure many of you are students at Hopkins in science or public health, look at SEWA and learn from it about how you can bring those ideas into your own lives in all the training you have or the wonderful training you have, and how do you make your research more reflexive so that it's not something you just do to publish papers and make your professors happy, but to actually directly benefit people, give them a say in how the research is done and what they do with the research, not just to publish in a journal. Okay, thank you.
How will we do now? 10 more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then I'd love to open the floor if anyone has any questions to come to the mics. So my first question is actually for Reema Ben. Since you've been operating the economy of nurturance for all these years, can you just elaborate for us a little bit more on what it means to build it from the ground up? What are the key challenges we have to be forewarned about? And how should we begin?
Sure, and I think I really liked what Cathy you said, and Biju what you also said, and so this is a model which has really come about. It's not a conceptual model, but I think it's grown out of our 5 decades of experience. And I think the fundamentals, as Rina Ben you just asked, are that the focus is on care, sustainability, and equity. It is a bottom-up, decentralized model where we have member-based organizations. And when I say member-based, these are the members just don't remain workers or producers, but they are the owners and managers and users of the organizations. The value measured is in well-being, resilience, and collective growth. And I think it is protective of nature, people, and future generations. And I think the best part of it is the feminine traits which are prioritized, which is empathy and collaboration. As BG, you were saying that, we believe in co-creation, in consensus building. And I think what we all need to really understand is that it needs investment of time and resources. This economy of nurturance, if we really are thinking about, it is a process where organizing is the key. Or the message that I bring from our members is that poverty is also a form of violence with the consent of the society. And if we really want to remove poverty. Why there is a need for this model? Because so many years and yet poverty persists, and it is in fact growing, and therefore the need for such a alternative development model which is needed, and where I think we co-create policies, we try to, and that's where organizing plays a big role. And organizing is a process. And I think organizing is also one of the surest ways to fight poverty. So that's what I think the message is.
Fantastic. Yes, I want to second the point that Reema Ben and Cathy have made about the power of organizing and how fundamental it is to transformation and to development, and is often left out of so-called policy discussions. But turning to you, Cathy, since you mentioned this question of scale, and because of your global expertise, how would we create a financial system at the national levels or at the global level that could support an economy of nurturance? And if you could maybe say, would it look different in the US versus India, or are we trying to create some kind of a transnational financial system?
Thanks so much. So, wow, we need a lot more time to talk about the new financial architecture, which definitely is needed. I don't think we have a system that's fit for purpose for the current moment. But I do think it's a bottom-up, right? So I think it goes back to some of the questions I said that we need to center in any conversation or policy making. Is it going to help the incense roller in Ahmedabad? Yes or no? the policy that I am thinking about? Is it going to improve someone's life, or is it going to improve someone's PhD prospects, right? I mean, we just basically had, and I think we want to, make sure that that question is centered and the environmental question that's centered. And then we need to totally recreate the metrics by which we measure progress and what is considered growth. This problem of GDP is a common metric will never get us to the economy of nurturance, because it's measuring, it fails to capture how economic growth is distributed. We really need to talk about power relations here, and that's why organizing is so important. You cannot change power imbalances without having collective power that pushes back. And that is what's fundamental, and that's what SEWA has done. And the GDP doesn't look at improvements in workers' wages or conditions or how they're living, that important first pillar. It fails to capture information about the well-being of workers. Are they healthy? How is climate impacting their health? I know there's people here that are working on that issue. So we need a totally different metric upon which our financial system is resting. Right now, as you well know, Viju, and you were just explaining, it's resting on a whole other set of principles and individual interests. Sometimes it's just personal interests. It's not about the bottom up. So I would say we need a different framework. And we're about to have the debate here in our own country about what are our priorities, right? We have budget discussions here. And at the global level, as there's a whole challenge to the current multilateral system, again, many people are grieving all the kind of insecurity and instability that we're feeling. And instead, I think we should be having more of these conversations about how we can take advantage of this moment to really ground ourselves in bottom-up different approaches and have a wellness, a well-being, a nurturance metric that really measures progress and drives investments.
Fantastic. So underlying, what I think is so interesting is underlying these question-oriented sort of approaches to development is in many ways a moral framework, a sort of moral reorientation towards connectivity, towards peace, towards security. But yet we're living in this world, as all of us have heard over and over again today, that is the opposite, right? It's insecure, it's polarized, and it is violent. And so, Biju, I wondered if you could tell us a bit about how do we create this reflexive approach or the economy of nurturance in this current climate? And specifically, are there institutions that you actually do have hope in? Forget the academic institutions, forget the development institutions, forget government, forget private sector. So is it religious organizations? Of course, we have unions, but what are the institutions that can actually lead a new moral framework?
Thanks for the question. I think, let's stick with India. We have the 73rd Amendment in the Indian Constitution, which gives us a model about how we can create decentralized government that is a hybrid system of electoral and deliberative democracy and participatory democracy. And it's treated as the stepchild of everything else. No IAS officer wants to be in charge of the Panchayati Raj ministry in any state. It's considered a low-level position. That's mad. It's a vehicle for tremendous sort of nurturing this kind of economy of nurturance. The NRLM, as I said, how do we bring these magnificent women's groups, 100 million women, into political power? How do we make that happen? That's another, something that can be truly transformative. But the third thing, and I think it's the power of technology. Let me explain the following sense. We think of technology as being part of the surveillance capitalism. We're getting sucked out of everything, which is true. But if we're going to start understanding well-being in a holistic way, what could be better instead of bugging the heck out of everybody with 2-hour surveys of how much rice you had last week and then calculating from that the poverty line? Why can't we just have conversations with people about how you're doing, as friends do, and have that interactive conversation with tens of thousands of people? It's possible. And then take all of that data, which is data at the end, and from there create a metric of well-being that is multidimensional, reflexive, and reflective of the bottom. Technology, in fact, we're working on something that will let you do that right now.
Okay, I know that time is not on our side, so I do just want to, before we thank this incredible panel and all our incredible speakers, I do want to just in conclusion, invite you to come and see a beautiful and multimedia exhibit that has been traveling across the country and then is actually on its way to travel internationally. And we have the amazing opportunity to have it here with us at Hopkins on the 8th and 9th floor today and tomorrow. And the exhibit is entitled Hum Sab Ek, We Are One. The exhibit was made by SEWA members as well as Harvard students. And it chronicles exactly how an economy of nurturance enabled SEWA members to handle the 2019 COVID pandemic. Dr. Sachit Balsari, who's Associate Professor of Emergency Medicine at Harvard University, and Hiteshri Das is here with us, who's at Harvard University's School of Design. And Bobby McCormick might be here, but they are the architects of this this exhibit. They're going to be holding tours throughout the conference of the exhibit. The first tour is just after this plenary, so please grab a cup of tea, come up to the 8th floor, and please see this beautiful exhibit and witness in picture and through the words of SEWA members how an economy of nurturance has carried millions and millions of people through crises such as the COVID pandemic. So please join me in thanking this incredible group of speakers, and I hope you're yes.
Sorry, we always end with a song, and since this is an India summit as well, so this is a song which comes from our members, and I'll sing it in our Hindi language. I'm sure who don't follow Hindi would also follow this song. Hum honge kamyab, hum honge kamyab, hum honge kamyab ek din. Oh, मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Please keep it going for this incredible panel. Thank you.